Hey, everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78, and I'm talking to my friend Richard. Do you go by Rick? Because I see Rick, I see Richard up on the book cover. I want to make sure I call you by the right name, sir.
That's okay. You can call me Rick.
Rick. And you wrote this book in conjunction with Glenn Allen called Played, correct?
Played the games of the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
Right, and that is, that is a humongous pivotal point in time, and it happened almost 100 years ago. So, and you're certainly not 100 and something years old. So, I imagine this was a lot of research and diving into this. But why? And before I really get started, where am I talking to you from?
I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm sitting in a booth at MIT.
MIT. So I just like to say that out loud again. That's fun for me. Sorry. But this story, though, an incredible story in time. What compelled you to write about this? Because there's a lot of things that went on in that Olympics, that trial and the rise of the Nazis and the whole thing. Like, there's so much to gather, and your book gets a lot of that, but there's still so much. So what made you find this story?
Well, I had always been fascinated about these particular Olympics because my family is from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And my great uncle, who I knew very, very well, was a champion downhill skier in Germany. And he was a Jew. And in 1936, he was in the top 10 in the world. And
Wow.
he was told he could not participate in the Winter Olympics, which were also happening in Germany, in Bavaria. And so that obviously, crushed him. And as he grew older, he would tell me the stories because I'm fascinated with history.
Absolutely.
And he would tell me these stories, and my family would tell me the stories of how life was in Germany during the mid-30s. And I always found that fascinating that, there were some Jews that thought, okay, no, we're going to be fine. They're not going to touch us. My family had a lot of wealth. We were cattle barons to the Hindenburg, and my great-grandfather didn't think he could be touched. But indeed, that was not the case. So that is what inspired me, really, that story. And then just the more research Glenn and I did, I brought him the story, and it was a magazine that I found in New York City at do you remember those old magazine stores in New York that you could just walk into, and there was old and new magazines from all over the world. And I grabbed
love those
one.
places.
Oh, I know, right? And
Yeah.
I grabbed one, and it was from Germany in the 30s, and it was all about the games. And I brought it to Glenn. We were actually making an independent film at the time that we had written and produced. And I said, I think this should be something we can do. And that was about 25 years ago. And we had just did the research,
25 years of talking, researching.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a labor of love if I've ever heard one. But just because there's so much to uncover, like what fascinated, I know, you have the story and you weave in other stories within the story. We mentioned right before we got started, the boys in the boat are characters in this novel. But what fascinated you the most that urged you to write this story when you were doing all this research?
Well, I believe the complicity of the American officials, the American Olympic officials, their complicity with the Nazis. That was the most surprising thing. And also the stories of all the athletes, and they ranged from 13 years old to, close to 30. And their stories, as we found out more and more, it just came together as one big sprawling soap opera that merged and came together in the biggest spectacle of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's really thrilling, but the heartbreak and the emotion and the triumph, it's got everything. This book has everything, and it's not a history book. It's a novel. It's entertainment, but it's true.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of, and go with me on this just for a second, Devil in the White City, if you've read that book, just because of the history aspect, not the serial killer part, or, whatever. But just all that history that was weaved throughout the book that helps tell this incredible story that was this. Some real life stuff that a lot of people, because of a movie that was released recently, and also, just our, American history. Like, how close was the United States to not participating in those Olympics.
And so that's interesting. That's a large part of the first half of our book is there was a real vote by the American Athletic or the American Amateur Athletic Union to whether we should even go or not.
Mm-hmm.
And Avery Brundage, who is our main antagonist, who was the head of the American Olympic Committee, who desperately wanted to be on the IOC, he was not going to take no for an answer, and he really cajoled that vote. But it was very close. I mean, I think it was within 6 votes, and I want to say close to 500 people voted across the United States.
Yeah, that Olympic Games alone. I mean, Jesse Owens was there, and and we all know how history viewed Jesse at that time, especially in that part of the world, along with all the other folks that were viewed outside of perhaps the way Germany at that time viewed people. So it was a huge moment in time just to show the world what the United States was all about, and also show the world, a reflection of the world, I think is what I'm saying, of like at the times and what people were doing and how they were doing. I mean, it's just it fascinates me on every level. It breaks my heart on every level. And also there's those little triumphs within little stories that ultimately turn out to be, what happens at the end of World War II, right?
Yeah, I mean, it really is about the athletes' achievements once we get to the games, because you've seen all this heartbreak and duplicity that has led up to the games, and now you're there, and it's all about the athletes, not just the Americans. We delve
Right.
into a lot of the German athletes and athletes from around the world, and it's really about them, and they want to compete, and it's riveting, and we become sportscasters. Once we get to the games, we change the whole complexion of the book. It's day 1 of the games. It's day 2 of the games. And as the games unfold, it's just as dramatic as what you just witnessed to get there, in both heartbreak and victory.
Right. And I think a lot of folks maybe who, grew up in the States didn't really realize the perception of things happening in Germany from the German perspective, somebody who wasn't a Nazi, who was just a German citizen or an athlete, and all
Yep.
this pressure to perform. And if you didn't perform, you were shamed. And
Yeah.
I
You
think that
you were put in the army. You were, put right into the army, and one of our main characters, Luz Long, who went against Jesse Owens in the long jump and literally helped him win his gold medal, his competitor. He won a special award posthumously for that achievement. I mean, we tell his story, and oh boy, that's really heartbreaking how he was, many of the German athletes that we delve into, it's a sad story how they were treated by the Nazis.
Right, among many, many others, of course.
Oh,
I mean, I fortunately had the opportunity to go to Germany last summer, actually, and really in Berlin, and really get to see, because it's always different when you see it, right? It's always different when you go to the place that the thing happened, whatever it is. And to be in Germany, and you see the wall there, you see the monuments from World War II, one particular one. I mean, they do a really great job of not hiding that history when you're there, which was a little, I don't know, as an American who read about it growing up, and then you're there in Germany and they're like, they own it right here, right out for the world to see. It's pretty incredible, but makes it that much more real. Because up until those moments, it's still like this little movie in your head of documentaries and books that you've read, but when you see it, it's just palpable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you walk around. I mean, I walk around Europe and I just feel the sense of history anywhere I am in Europe, right? As, I've walked around Prague and just I have felt the presence of the 15th century, So,
Mm-hmm.
when you walk around Germany and especially Berlin, with what my family went through, I try not to go to Germany too often to spend money there. I got to tell you, but
Yeah.
you do get this eerie sense that something happened here that was just above and beyond what humanity should have had to deal with.
Right. I mean, when you just look at some of the buildings, you can see where they filled in all the bullet holes, where, because you
Yeah.
look at it like, oh, is that just a different color marble or stone? No, that's
No.
patches to a
Yeah.
building that was half of what it looks like
Oh
at
yeah.
one time, and you mentioned this, and I just wanted to touch on a little bit. You go out of your way, perhaps maybe not to spend money in Berlin or Germany. Was it hard? Was that much harder for you then to do the research for this, to uncover things maybe that you didn't even know about that part of the history?
Uh, it was eye-opening.
Mm.
It wasn't difficult, but it certainly was eye-opening to find out that we almost didn't go, and that when we did go, the rest of the world followed, and they would have followed if we didn't go. And, that gave credence to the Nazis, and it put money in the coffers. And, that seriously helped build their war machine. So, you know, certainly left a distaste in my mouth
Hmm.
with some of the things that we found out, and some of the ways both the Americans treated their own athletes, and the Germans treated their athletes. I mean, all of that, I it's it's rough sometimes.
Yeah, history's not pretty, right? As
No,
much as
no.
lately in society, people however they want to recognize history by removing things or whatever. I mean, history is not pretty, and I think sometimes and remembering World War II stands out to be one of those moments in history where, at least on this side of the world, we try to remember it. We remember it the American way, though, of course, like
Mhm.
according to what we thought happened. And I imagine you saw things in your research where you're like, wow, this is just a little bit different than what I grew up listening to or the institutions in America.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's face it. These people, these Nazis, were people. They were real people that were given the keys to the kingdom,
Hmm.
right? They were like the fox led into the hen house. And that makes it even more frightening. And so we weren't going to shy away about that. We weren't going to shy away. We wanted to show Hitler as a character. I mean, this was a real man who got involved in politics, who hated a certain kind of people, and even more than just one kind.
Hmm.
And people wrapped around him in a very frightening way. And but he was real, and he got hooked on drugs, and it became worse. And he and his girlfriend started going crazy because of all the drugs they were doing. And you have a madman already doing drugs, going crazy, running a country. I mean, it's just not a recipe for success there. So,
No.
but we wanted to make these people real because that's the horror of it, right? So showing Goebbels as a person, we were very intent on doing that. We want people to read it. And, this is a novel. It's entertainment. I don't want anyone to forget that. It's not a history book. It is very entertaining. I mean, what other book are you going to see Hitler shooting up with Eva Braun, you know? But, I mean, this is what happened. And we just make it one big, very entertaining soap opera that has like a roller coaster ride of emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you read it, you thumb through the pages, and you think about it, and you're like, man, oh man, like this is an incredible story that could also live on in many ways, including even I'm sure, like, man, this could be a movie at some point if we do it
Oh,
just right and do it in the way we want to, so it doesn't get screwed up by producers, if you will. Like you
well,
want a creative control, obviously.
well, we obviously have the book in some very serious hands, and we're hoping for the best.
Well,
And we wrote this initially to be a limited series.
ah,
So we gathered all this information to initially make it into a series. And then our producers came to us and said, look, you pretty much have most of a book written here. You should write the book. And then the series can be based on your book. And we acquiesced, and we finally did it. And, you know, that was a challenge, obviously, but we had the material. We had done the research.
yeah.
So, but we see it as a miniseries or a limited series.
Right. The hard part, I imagine, is just getting it all into a cohesive story, a story to tell, because you probably had mounds of research. And you're like, how the hell do we take this and put it into something that people can, read in a couple hours?
Well, the thing is, because we had thought of it as a series to begin with, we had a generous population of characters here to
Hmm.
work with. And we wanted to take our time, and we wanted the reader to learn every single person that was there on both sides of the continents, like, I mean, on both sides of the ocean, we it was written for this. So yeah, it just became this sweeping soap opera and piecing the puzzles together in a way that became like a flow to the readers was definitely a challenge, but it's what we wanted. And we're filmmakers, so we thought Robert Altman. That's what we thought. Like his
Oh, yeah.
films, like the movie MASH and Nashville, and he had all these sprawling characters talking over each other, and but you get such a sense of where you are in those films and those people, no matter how many characters, you know them all.
And you identify with ones over the other based on your own personal habits
That's
and
it.
thoughts. And yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
For folks that want to purchase this book, is there a specific website that you have that you want people to go to, or should they go to their local bookstore or hit up the Big A, the Amazon?
You could go to the Big A, you could go to the Big BNN. You can go to your local bookstores and order it if they don't have it there. You can also go to greenbandana.org. That's one word, greenbandana.org. And that's our website, and you can order it there as well.
This was a wonderful conversation about something I imagine difficult when you were going through it, just finding things, then thinking, how do I take this awful thing and turn it into something that continues this story without it affecting you personally? I imagine that was difficult.
At times it certainly was.
Yeah.
Some of these characters did some pretty cruel things, and you can't help but be touched by it. But you certainly think it's important in the overall scheme of the story to put that in, and so we didn't shy away from anything.
No, and I think that's why it resonates so well with people, and also probably gives people pause on the things that have happened here in the States in the last, few years, where you're just like,
Yeah.
I read something interesting in one of the things about your book where, Ava Braun even said, "Make Germany great again."
Yeah,
And
you
whew,
can't look. You can't deny the parallels, but we want the reader to see it on their own. We want them to see it for themselves. How scary the relevance to today is with this book, because there's so many storylines in this book that touch upon what is going on in the world today, not just America, but the world. And it is very frightening. Some of the same verbiage is being used.
yeah. And that's why this book is so important for people to check out. So buy it at your local bookstore, hit it up on Amazon or your website as well. Greenbandana.org. Is that right?
Yep. And the book is Played: The Games of the 1936 Berlin Olympics.
Rick, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I do appreciate you spending a little bit of time to share your experience in doing this.
Thank you so much for having me, man. That was great. I really appreciate it.